Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, Letting Agent Tried to Screw Me, My Landlord, and Flatmates. Ended up on national TV for all the wrong reasons. My story starts around this time last year. My flatmates and I had signed a lease with the town's biggest letting agent the November before to secure a large flat for the academic year. Most of us had lived together the academic year before in halls-type accommodation, and we were looking forward to having somewhere that we could call home for a year, and that was a bit less sterile. Anyway, we had recently left our previous accommodation and were in all corners of the country when one of us spotted a post on the big local Facebook group asking the next tenants of this flat us to contact them. As it turns out, this letting agency, which we will call Ailing Letting Agent (ALA), owed our landlord tens of thousands of pounds of rent. The students had paid it to ALA, who managed the property, but the landlord hadn't seen most of it. The landlord, who we will call Super Landlord SL, informs us that he's going to be repossessing the flat from ALA, but reassures us that we will have somewhere to live and we can sign a contract with him. As it turns out, I'm due to visit the town that this property is in a week or two after. It gets to before the day I visit and the landlord has changed the locks, but we haven't heard a peep from the letting agent. At this point we didn't know who to trust, so we waited to see if ALA got in contact with us and kept quiet. I walk to the flat and see that indeed there is a notice saying the property has been taken back. So I decide to pay ALA a visit and act dumb. I go into ALA and meet the director, let's call him Creepy Bossman, CB. I mention I was in the town and saw the flat had been repossessed, and CB tells me that it's been taken illegally and he's going to take SL to court and get it back within a few days. I ask why it was taken in the first place and I get a blustery answer where the question was ultimately avoided. Anyway, I'm assured the property will be in ALA's hands within a few days. I ask CB what would happen if by some miracle, he quoted a 1 in 10,000 chance, ALA didn't get the property back. I was told that was fine, we can sign with SL. A few weeks go by and the property is still safely in SL's hands. SL is completely honest with us and keeps us regularly updated. We have concerns about signing 2 contracts, so he says we can sign with him on the day we move in, and if we want to find somewhere else he'll understand. We hear about some of the stuff CB getting up to as well. When SL retook the property, he was surprised to see that there were people in there who weren't the current tenants. Turns out the rooms had been double rented over the holidays. ALA had also used money given to buy furniture and merely leased it, meaning SL had to shell out to actually buy it all. It gets to 3 days before we're about to move in. An email pops up, it's from CB. He tells us that ALA doesn't have the property due to the illegal actions of SL. He can however provide us with another 2 properties, which would break our group up, were in a worse location and looked crap compared to our current one. I talk to my flatmates and I send him, on behalf of everyone, a very short email to let him know that we consider our contract terminated. CB quickly sends a chain of emails, none of which I reply to, firstly claiming it would be illegal for us to move in, then asking why I won't reply, then asking if he could speak to our parents. The ducking cheek of it. As if it's not bad enough firstly lying to us, and then trying to scare us so we get screwed out of a property we signed for. But that isn't the last of revenge-worthy actions of CB. Me and another flatmate move in the day the tenancy is supposed to start, without letting CB know. It's very hard to evict someone once they're in a house, and we were still erring on the side of caution. The day after we move in, we give CB a surprise visit to ask for our deposits back. He is still adamant that he is going to get the property back within a few days and that giving us back our deposits would be an admission of guilt. We strongly argue that the contract has been violated and terminated. He doesn't budge. This goes on for a few weeks and we get the same blustery answers every time we go in. This guy is not planning to pay our deposits, ever. So to recap, CB has tried to screw us all out of a house, has constantly lied and withheld information, and is trying to screw us out of our deposits. Time for revenge. If he's gonna try and screw us out of money, we might as well have a go at getting him to lose as much money as possible. Disquiet among other landlords and students is growing, and banners denouncing ALA and CB are being hung up on roundabouts and houses around town. I make a couple of inquiries with the cab and find out that the deposit is illegally held. It should be in a scheme, so even without the whole break of contract thing it's illegal, and that means every student who is renting from ALA is entitled to their deposit back. Of course the contract is worded to try and say it's not a deposit, but it most certainly is. I make the SU aware of this and unfortunately are about as much use as a chocolate teapot. They won't do anything in case they get sued by ALA. Not to worry, the local notice board on Facebook has about 13,000 members, most of them students, and I make a post asking if anyone is having trouble with ALA and revealing some of their troubles. As it turns out, there are quite a few others who are affected, many with worse things to say than I have. I like to think it put a few people off going with ALA. Anyway, shortly after I get a golden call. It's a producer from the BBC. SL has been in contact with them and they wanted to hear how students had been affected. Now of course me and my flatmates were more than happy to oblige. I kept in regular contact with producer guy, PG. During this time I'm regularly giving CB surprise visits to ask for my deposit back. I know it's not happening, but I'm having fun being able to vent and call him a liar to his face and calling him out on all the bullshit he tried to pull on us. He seems to get more and more irate as time goes on and rumors spread about ALA's predicament. It appears to be going into liquidation. PG is pretty quiet about the show he works for, and makes sure in the last couple of weeks that we don't give anything away to suspect that the BBC are investigating CB. PG asks us to make small videos outlining how CB has screwed us over, and he even says in one conversation that this guy is unbelievable. There's so much stuff to get through that the airing even gets delayed. Eventually a date is set, and we find out the program is a big primetime consumer show. I make sure all my family is watching, and the rest of the town on the notice board. It was glorious. There is hidden camera footage of him shouting at some old lady, his lower shirt buttons are undone and he's saying things which are quoted for months after. Think of David Brent's lines mixed with Gollum's anger and hissing. The show does a sting in a prospective house. The camera and presenter come out, and he runs away. I had calls from family saying CB was unbelievable. Memes were flying all over Facebook and Yik Yak. I would post the YouTube video of it, but I think it would break the subreddit rules. Now was the time to put in the final kick while he was down. I'm sure many of you are wondering why we didn't just take CB to court. Well, initially we were unsure to how solid a case was. CB was intimidating and we didn't want to press until we had a watertight case. Then the BBC thing came along and we decided to wait. The morning after the show aired I visited CB. The staff was saying how bad it was while I was waiting. I go in and CB isn't particularly happy with me. Obviously he had seen me and my flatmates on the show. I asked him one last time for the deposits and he relented, so I served him with a letter threatening to take him to court in 2 weeks if he didn't pay up. He has a read and he is getting visibly angrier. He says that's very good for a student, and regrettably I lose it, laying into him trying to incorporate as many of the previous night's quotes as I could. He tells me to get out, and as I'm passing one of his staff I say, "Your boss is a goon." They wholeheartedly agree with me. 2 weeks later we got all our money back as a gesture of goodwill. The first beer I bought with that tasted so good. The company folded soon after and is now trading as something else. It's a shame CB is still in business screwing over students, but it's well known that CB is a scumbag, and everyone knows to avoid the new company. Hopefully it won't last long. The next one is titled, "Neighbors only seem to speak one language," so I spoke it in reply. I recently bought a row house. Next to my house is a servitude. A path 1.5 meters where other neighbors have right of passage. But the path itself is my property and I have to maintain it. But recently there's another passage 3 meters next to my left neighbor, so my path is never used. I know this because the shutter is electric. But I shut off my electricity when I stop working, so the shutter can't be opened. So my plan was to get rid of the fence between my yard and the servitude, both my property. I checked with the correct instance if I was allowed to, and there's no reason why I won't be allowed, just have to make sure there's still 1.5 meters passageway. When I was getting rid of my fence, my right side neighbor says hi for the first time. Not saying hi but asking what I'm doing. After I explain I'm getting rid of the fence. He somewhat says it's only half my property, need to place another fence. And asks if I could keep the shutter closed most of the time, else his cat runs towards the street. I ignored part 1 and said, no problem, for the cat issue. I wanted to keep the shutter closed anyway. Few weeks go by and I have a container coming. I get the call at 7:30 a.m. that the truck driver is there but can't place the container. 3 cars are parked in a temporary no parking zone. One was on vacation, the other was a neighbor from across the street, and the other was obviously the right door neighbor. I had to call the police to figure out which car was from whom so I wasn't waking up people at 7:30 a.m. Then the container was getting placed in front of their house because that was how it was drawn up by the city. I just asked for a license and the city decides the exact spot. They complained and whined to the police officer that they were moving that weekend, etc. I wish now that I placed it in front of their house. But it would have been a bit more convenient on the other side, and the police officer replaced the signs and the container was moved. Then they came outside and asked the officer if the container could be placed at the other side off the street, which would mean that I had to walk across a street every time I needed to dump something in my container. It was 20 cubic meters, so a lot was going in there. Officer said that there's no way in hell that would happen. Then the guy asked I not throw anything from my first floor into the container and that I did it before from the back. Newsflash, that was the previous inhabitants, not me. But whatever, dude. Keep in mind that until the container is placed I have to pay the driver. So those being parked illegally costs me money. All said and done. The day after I had done a lot already and it was time for a break. Me, my dad and my best friend had just eaten outside and were chatting when the mother from one of the neighbors addressed us. Man, that doesn't look great. Not even a hi, just that line, talking about my grass that was growing really high because I wasn't living there yet and had been working inside all the time. My dad replies it will be easy work, just one pass and it'll be fine. Then she asks what I am planning to do about the fence, if I'm placing a new one. I inform here that I'm not placing any fence. You'd think I'd killed their firstborn by the way she reacted. I couldn't do that, that path isn't mine, yada yada. I inform her that it is my property. She says it's in their certificate, that's the word right, that it's not. I ask her to show me given I don't have mine at this house yet. She says they will and asks her daughter, I assume, to fetch it. She keeps yapping on and I tell her I won't discuss this and I'll continue when she shows me the documents. She keeps talking but I just resume my talking with my dad. 5 minutes later she's there with the certificate. I go over and ask if there's a ground plan with it. There's one with mine. There isn't, but there's a clause referring to the servitude. It clearly says I have to make sure the other 4 neighbors have passage and then a bunch of details about the passage. But it says it's mine. At that point the guy is there again and seems rather aggressive. There's a fence between us so I don't care. I state once more it's my property and I can do this. He then raises his voice, don't act like you're a big shot, the man with my property. And then, in almost the same breath asks if I can close the shutter from the servitude after I'm done working. I had opened it to get through with a wheelbarrow. I found that pretty ironic, given they can't open it. And if I had to abide by the certificate they just showed me I would have to keep it open. I angrily replied that if he'd keep on yapping on I'd keep the shutter open. He walked away. Now I'm not a petty man so I closed the shutter. Wouldn't want an innocent cat get hurt or lost. I guess this is when the war started though, and they saw me as the devil neighbor who has it in for them. So the day after I'm working again, breaking out a floor. There's no easy way doing that. I have a jackhammer, some normal hammers and chisels and 3 people working with me on it. Few hours after working the doorbell rings, the police. So they called the police for noise pollution. I explained I had to break out this floor. I'll try to not be too noisy when I dump things in my container, but there's no way I can break out a floor with silence. On top of that, the servitude is between my house and theirs, doubt a lot of noise is coming through. Police asks how much time I think I need and I say I estimate a few hours. 2 to 3. They leave, likely informing the neighbors of what I said and that they advised to go somewhere for the few hours. So I'm working as hard as I can and my jackhammer breaks. It's broken, no way I get it working. We try with just hammers and chisels but it's way slower. Given I don't want to make noise all day long anyway, I do have other neighbors as well. I actually go to the store and buy a new jackhammer. But it's not easy finding an open store on a Sunday. So find one, get back to work. My front door is open because else I have to reopen it every time I pass with the wheelbarrow with stone. The woman is standing there with the kid and probably yelling something but I can't hear her, there's someone using a jackhammer between us. Eventually it dies down and she's yelling. How can I be so selfish? And I said it would only be a few hours and I had all day yesterday to do my work, as if I didn't do anything the day before. Besides, I'm allowed to work on my schedule, not theirs. My stepdad is bored with it and just starts using the jackhammer again. She can't be heard. Her husband takes her away, but within a second she's back, yells, "At least close your damn door," and slams my door shut. I wanted to go outside and floor this witch. Who the hell does she think she is? But I didn't, because I, compared to others, can control and channel my anger. I spend the rest of the day that I was working figuring out how I would get what I would perceive as justice. Given that we have a shared border at our property, I took photographs of everything. First I went to a lawyer to ask about certain things I figure was an infraction. So they have a tarp on my side of the fence at the servitude, probably to stop wind from gusting on their backyard. That one has to go. Right next to it there's a straw one at their veranda, probably to stop me from looking in. That one has to go. Their bin for compost is bending the wire fence onto the servitude, has to be moved. I didn't do anything yet with this information. I asked a surveyor to measure my ground. Mainly the backside. Because they have a shed, and after that shed their fence suddenly jumps in. I was pretty sure it was on the servitude and therefore on my property. The same would be true about the attached gate at my side. Turns out I was right, it was on my property and in violation of the servitude clause. If that fence remained, I could not provide 1.5 meters because off my garage. I glanced over and noticed they have some nice concrete at the other side. I'd enjoy watching them break out and move the fence. But still I looked for more. I didn't want to annoy them, I wanted to make sure they understood I don't play games, I win wars. So while I was looking at the certificate of my house, there's another clause. Because the neighbors get right of passage, they have to pay 1/5 off all costs for the servitude. I had placed an electric shutter, new tiles, the works. I contacted my lawyer with all I had. All documents necessary, and got him to send an official letter with all the issues found and that they should comply. They didn't. I sued them. And as we know these cases, they drag on. In the meanwhile they were planning to move and their house was for sale. But you're having a hard time selling when you are being sued over an issue with the property. I won the case, but they didn't do anything. I sued them again for not complying and they finally did. They had to pay me quite a lot in legal costs for the work done on my servitude, and some for the work to do on their end. I also assume they had to get a bridge credit to pay for the new house while the old is on sale. They eventually did manage to sell and move. They spoke to me with arrogance and aggression. I showed them not to taunt me when I try to be friendly the first 2 times. The next one is titled, Bridezilla Catering Rage. I used to manage a catering company for my boss while he was undergoing chemotherapy. This is one of my first gigs where I was in charge. The bride calls me at 1 in the afternoon the day before the wedding and decides she wanted a cheaper menu. She and her husband already paid for almost everything and it's far too late to change anything. I told her that, but she started throwing a witch fit, saying that she wants to change the steak to a chicken and demanded we either serve chicken or charge her the price of the chicken, and she will not be paying for anything extra. I informed her that according to the contract she is to receive 150 steak lunches at a price of $50 per plate, and it also states that she can't change the menu unless she does it at least a month before the wedding. When she hears this, she flips the hell out and starts screaming at me, calling me illiterate and telling me her fiancé is a lawyer and they will sue me, etc. She handed the phone over to her fiancé and he also started screaming at me, saying it's his damn wedding and he can have whatever he wants. They end up firing me at the moment, and I inform them that the cancellation fee is 90% of the cost of catering, which I was already paid for, and they start screaming at me, telling me that I ain't crap and they can get anyone to cater for them and they are going to make me pay for it, etc. They end up hanging up on me, thank God, and I had an inkling that I should probably keep making the food in case they call tomorrow and they want us to cater. So we finish cooking, and the next day at 7 AM I get a call from the groom and he demands that I come down there to cater the wedding or they are going to sue me for not providing service. I calmly tell the guy that they terminated the contract yesterday, and as per the termination clause on the contract, we are entitled to keep 90% of the entire cost of catering. He is raging. He didn't say anything, but I can feel how mad he is over the phone. After a moment of awkward silence, I inform him that if he would like us to cater the event, he has to do same-day catering, which is 3x the original price I charged him. He has to pay all fees in advance, and the food depends on what we have available and ready, and we also reserve the right to refuse service. He gets really upset at this point, telling us this is extortion. He already paid for food, so he didn't have to pay again. I informed him again of the termination clause and also informed him that the food was for a previous contract and that contract had ended and he would have to pay for it again. He ended up starting a new contract with us and for 3x the original price. He tried to change the menu again just to spite me, but I then made sure he knew I reserved the right to refuse service. He and his bridezilla kept everything the same down to the baby carrots and of course the steak, all while paying me 3x the original price if they had just stuck with the original contract. As soon as we got to the venue, before I got anything out, I made the bride and groom sign the new contract and pay me completely in advance, $22K, and left to deposit the money. While I was gone, they harassed my caterers and threatened someone with deportation even though they were legal. He tried to sue us later and the judge heard the recorded phone calls, saw the contract and told him to pay my legal fees. I looked them up on Facebook recently, apparently they are divorced now. It's only been 3 years. The last one is titled, Cleaning Up After Them. Background: I'm in my 30s, have a wife and 2 children and I work 2 jobs so my wife can stay home and take care of our children. I hate the idea of putting them in daycare and I'm still going to school, so I work a ton, but usually no big deal. Currently I work 2 office jobs, pretty chill, but I used to work 5 days a week in the evening running a 3-man cleaning team in a call center. I cleaned there for 1.5 years before quitting. Best decision ever, leaving that is. Story: so me and my crew cleaned for 4 hours each night. I made the other 2 clean the main floor area and I cleaned upstairs in some offices and lobbies, etc. There were many large, rather gross folk in this center. They had ongoing, week-long potlucks. Crock pots of food and bags of chips, cakes, cookies, just sitting open on tables for days. The building obviously had a mouse and roach problem. Our crew was specifically told to clean the trash and floors in the call center but not to touch their food. So we never did and it would just sit and rot until they got around to it. Now I will tell more stories in time, but this story concerns one fat man-child we shall call Hamleg. I referred to him as Hamleg because his calves resembled cartoon hams. He was 300 plus and thought he was cool, backwards hat, lazy speech, etc. Now I cleaned the top floor and that floor had 1 bathroom. People would go up there when they really had to take a dump. Now Hamleg had a habit of going up there every afternoon around 5 PM and unloading his bad choices. Now, he was so big he apparently couldn't aim and would end up getting it all over the back of the bowl and seat. So I would have to scrub it off, every night. Now, he thought he was sneaky and would use different doors so he didn't think I knew. But I'm not an idiot, and I was friends with the security guard. We reviewed the footage and we knew it was him. This went on for the full 1.5 years I worked there. I loathed Hamleg like no other, and had similar feelings towards the other gross people that worked there. Now, there are few things I could do to address this problem, but I have some ingenuity. Due to my experiences cleaning up after Hamleg, and other stories to be told at a later date, I felt some sort of response was needed in general. As the team leader, I was expected to order supplies and keep the place stocked. I did a good job of this and we always had everything we needed. One day about a month before I quit, the daytime cleaner forgot to refill a women's bathroom with toilet paper and we got this ridiculously angry written complaint and I had my epiphany. I timed my orders and amounts and suddenly stopped ordering toilet paper. I put in my 2 weeks and a week before I left my coworker, great ex-military guy, still a good friend, started asking me, "Hey, so, are you going to order more toilet paper?" I was like, "No, I think we're good," and smiled. Now he had no interest in taking over my duties with ordering supplies and he was there for exercise so he could care less what happened. He really didn't need the money. The third guy was clueless, right out of high school and couldn't care less either. So on my last night I walked out the front door when the call center closed with all the extra toilet paper. I left just 1 roll in all the bathroom stalls so it looked like they had been filled and let nature take its course. That next morning I had 5 missed calls from my old boss. She left me 1 voicemail asking me to please call her back and let her know if we had toilet paper stored in a different location because the day cleaner couldn't find it. I never answered. I got a report from my ex-military buddy the next day and ongoing texts from my buddy the security guard. Apparently the 450 employees came in the morning and they ran out of toilet paper within 30 minutes. The security guard was laughing his butt off in his closed office watching the security cameras while they frantically searched the building. Apparently they sent a call center manager to Costco a couple hours in to buy mass quantities of toilet paper. There were multiple fat gross people in the bathroom who had to wait there because they didn't realize there was no paper before unloading. I got one hilarious text after another from the security guard as he watched the madness unfold. Thanks for listening.